What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, and today I have back with me Mollie Stahl, Senior Account Executive at Rockway. Mollie, welcome back.
Oh, good to be back. Excited to
Yes,
be
good.
here.
Yeah, good to have you. So Mollie and I are going to talk a little bit today about our favorite booths, our favorite engagement strategies, and we're really going to talk a good bit about what we consider to be like theme, experiential concepts, ideas, and storytellings through trade show exhibits. Much of our favorite booths and favorite engagement strategies all run through theme, through experiential, through concept ideas and storytelling. So that's essentially what we're going to do today. We're going to give you some real examples, jobs that we've worked on, jobs that we've created start to finish. We're going to give you some examples of jobs that we've seen that we liked. And I think the other thing that's probably, I want to say most important, but something that I think is really important is we're going to break down how to think through this. So if you have an upcoming trade show booth or you have an upcoming event project, it's great to just say, hey, I want to have an experiential idea, but how do you come to that? Right? What matters? What are the ingredients? What is the sort of framework for the way that you need to think? And we're going to kind of walk you through that. Right? So let's get started here, Mollie. Where I'm going to start is this. I'm going to start with a little bit of the idea of, I mentioned this earlier. When you're doing a trade show booth and you're going to a show, a theme is huge for me. Can you come up with a theme? To me, it's like the number one thing, because people use the term experiential. Great. Experiential can mean a lot of things, but what is the theme? What is the concept? What is the idea? And I think some of the things that people miss is it's not just like throwing an idea at the wall and seeing if it sticks. It's asking yourself as a business going to a show, what is your value proposition to your customer? What is the problem that you solve for your customer? What is your customer's point of view? What is your unique solution? Right? The other things you can ask yourself, what is your messaging? What is your narrative? And then from there, that's where you go to find a theme. That's where you go to find an idea. That's where you come up with a story that you want to tell as a company. And then you go design and build out and execute something and tie it all together. Mollie, let's start with something that we've done that maybe you've worked on that you think would be a good example for everybody.
Yes, and I think how you just broke that out too was excellent, right? Everybody that's listening to this, if they're planning events and they're working for their company and events and planning, they can literally write down exactly all those value problem solve, your POV, all of that, and then try to think about a theme too. So I think that was excellent how you broke that down.
You know what's the other
Um,
thing I think about with that? The other thing I think about is a lot of companies already have the messaging. Like they don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean? Like their marketing department's good. They have campaigns. They have like really dialed messaging and narrative. And it's like if you were to just say to them, like, hey, what do you want to tell your customer? What is it? Like, what do you want your customer to hear? They already have the messaging. They already have these like embedded themes. Take it and run with it, but build your concept, idea, theme, and everything off of that stuff if you already have it.
Yeah, no, so one that we did earlier last year, and this was just very a themed booth, and there was a Canadian dog food company. And so basically they've been going to pet food shows for years and years, right? They were displaying their product. They really just did like big, bold graphics before, like, had a nice structure. The booth looked nice, but then coming with a new booth that they wanted to launch last year, they really were like, okay, what can we do for a theme? And they're in Canada, so it is cold.
It's very cold in
Wrong
Canada
time.
all the
Yep.
time.
And so they are based in Canada, so they wanted to do a lodge theme for their booth. So everything happens, right? It's all this natural product that they're making the dog foods at. It's happening in Canada, less processed, everything like that. So basically they came to us, we talked through a couple different ideas, and we came up about this lodge concept, right? They wanted someone to come like they're walking into like a lodge, a hotel, and a stay. So when you walk into a lodge, right, it's kind of open, airy. There's like big wooden beams up at the top, right? You think brick, you think wood, cafe, because it's cold. You got to get some hot chocolate. Then most of the time there's like a retail space that you can go buy food, whatever at. And so basically we came up with this concept that the whole booth looked like a lodge. So you walked in, there was a huge overhead roof structure that we did. It was a 50 by 50 booth, and it was just from back, 50-foot long. It was a giant wood structure that we put up there to make it actually look like a roof when you walked in. We did, brick pillars. there was a coffee bar there. And then, you know, a small detail that even they went the extra mile. They did printed paw prints on top of the coffee to tie
Hmm.
everything in. Then they displayed the bags like retail. So when you really walked in, it was open, airy, there was seating, and it honestly just looked and felt like a lodge, mostly because of the roof structure, honestly.
The roof structure was extremely cool, and it did look like you were walking into a lodge, right? It looked like you were walking into a lodge somewhere cold, somewhere nice, somewhere just like a place you know would want to be in that type of weather, right? And I think one of the things that you said that's making me think about here how exhibits like this, how they differentiate and how they stand out is what you said about like a normal pet company, pet food booth. Like they used to do a nice booth, nice structure, they would put up really nice images of their food and dogs eating them. And it's like, but that's what everybody does.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell a story. So if you have 10 dog food companies, there's no story. It's just really great images of probably extremely cute dogs eating food, right? So whereas this is telling more of their story,
Right.
telling the story of who they are. And I think little subtleties like that help people stand out on the show floor. And it's just not that hard to do. You just got to be willing to kind of take the jump and take the risk.
Yeah, I agree. So that was one.
Give me another example.
So I think a good one, and I'm sure we've talked about it on the podcast here before, and you've obviously done a lot of interviews when you're there. So at our booth at Exhibitor Live.
Yeah.
So we Rockway, we went to Exhibitor Live, we did trade show booth there. And so when we thought about the theme that we wanted to do is a boutique hotel. So then
Mm-hmm.
we built our whole entire booth around the theme of it being a boutique hotel, right? The story did not tell Scream that we're a trade show booth company, right? It had that unique tie to it. You had the podcast station over on, you know, one of the right sides, but it all tied together with like a whole hotel theme. And I just thought that was great because we were actually showing who we are. And we went through the entire process that we're talking right now about how do you
Yeah.
go through theme? How do you think about it? How do you differentiate yourselves? You know, one of our things was that we feel like we're a boutique trade show partner for clients. And so how do we take that concept and bring that to life and show that on the show floor?
Yeah. I thought it's a good example. It's ours, so it's hard to like talk or, you know what I mean? You don't want to be braggy, but I think we did go through our process. I mean, we eat our own dog food, right? I mean, we did. We talked. We're like, what do we think right now in this moment? What's our value proposition to our clients, right? You know, we talk about what's the problem we solve for them, what's our point of view on the industry. I mean, we talked about all that stuff, and we really felt like at the end of the day, in that exhibit hall, there are companies that were a little bit smaller than us, but there was majority of companies from a revenue size, longevity size, company size, just bigger than us, had been around for a while. We were new. It was the first time exhibiting. And we felt like we are a boutique style trade show and event company. And then, you know, there's a whole piece of that behind that as to why we're boutique, right? That led us into saying, let's design our booth. Let's make people feel like they're in a boutique hotel. And then people were asking, why is your booth a boutique hotel? Well, why sets us up to be able to then talk directly about our value proposition that goes towards them. It stood out. It was different. It was unique. We didn't have wasted space. All of the engagement lined up, and it looked like we were podcasting in the lobby of a boutique hotel.
Yeah, that's great.
So, Molly, give me another example. And I think the one that we want to get to is the chemical company that we do business with, because I think they had a really cool display in the sense that chemical company, and they really found a way, you know, we sort of found a way to go outside the box with it, right? And they did not look at all like a chemical company, I would say, on the show floor. So just tell me a little bit. I know there was like a mixing station, DJ. So it was like this idea of playing on mixing like a DJ does, but also mixing with chemicals to create compounds and prototypes, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. No, you hit it right there. So basically, they wanted it to be like a party feel, right? So like neon
Mm-hmm.
sign, they had a neon sign on the backdrop, right? That was kind of like this brick backdrop with a neon sign, had people come in, and basically you could see on the wall graphics, it was like push the button, play the music, feel the prototypes, right? And then there was
Yep.
neon signs. So it's already catching your eye. So you're like, okay, well, what does this
Yeah.
mean? So then you walked up to the booth, and then there was a center station that had 4 color buttons on it, and that represented each 4 different right areas of their business.
Yep.
And you'd come up, you push the button, and then there was like 4 sections of like towers in it. And so then the one tower would light up the specific color. And it was like red, blue, green, and yellow that we had. So then as your people are walking by, you're touching this button, the one it's lighting up, and then it's not lighting up anymore. And that associates the color with the prototype. And then also you were wearing headsets with it when you came up to engage. And then the mixing station where the DJ was playing
Yep.
was putting a silent disco in your ear as well,
Yeah.
associated with the different genre of music that they put with this specific pillar. So there's a lot going on, and the senses are heightened. You're touching this, you're feeling this, you're pushing the color, the neon, you're listening to the specific music, and then you're walking through what the product is and how it relates back to the color, and then actually the genre of music as well. So
I love that. I mean, that booth, if I recall, it just had such a cool vibe to it. It had such a different vibe. And I think what it's really doing is telling a story, right? Them as a chemical company, they are trying to tell a story creatively about their chemicals, about, right, their prototypes, their, the way they mix them and the like there's so much there. Obviously, you could geek out and go that route. I'm not going to because I don't know enough about chemicals, but no, those are the ideas that work. Those are the ideas that grab people. Because obviously the people that are coming up, they understand these products. They understand the industry. They understand all of that. So now you're mixing in music, you're mixing in lighting, you're mixing in a certain type of engagement. So that one was really a fun one to work on. When we were talking about doing this, I was thinking to myself, right? I was thinking like, okay, if I'm an event marketer, I'm working at a company and I'm tasked with designing a trade show booth with a company like ours or somebody, have a decent budget. What am I trying to do? What am I trying to accomplish? And the more that I think about it, it ties back to what I said earlier. I think it is, in a way, it's telling a story, and people remember stories and people remember experiences. I'm just going to remember your trade show booth just for remembering your trade show booth, right? So how can you come up with a story? How can you deliver an experience? So like, I was just thinking, like, I was just looking around my house a little bit. I'm thinking to myself like, well, what's an example of a product or a service I use or something that I could think about? Like, how would I think through this? And I have a speaker. It's a company called Bang and Olufsen that makes speakers. And so I started thinking to myself like, okay, like, as a user of this speaker, I love it. I use it all the time. And it has this really cool feature where it has sound modes to it. So it's like, if you're listening to, like, I don't know, hip hop music or EDM music, it has like a party style sound mode and the music just sounds incredible. If I'm listening to a podcast, it has a speech mode. So literally it amplifies the speech versus all the other noise. So you can just hear the conversation so much better. It has an ambient mode. It has an optimal mode, which has like, it actually decides what it's listening to, right? It's almost like an optimizer for what you're listening to. But I just thought to myself, like, okay, like, what a cool feature. And if you were selling it to somebody like myself, like, I almost got the speaker because of it. So if I was at a trade show and they were doing it and they had those speakers out, how could you come up with a theme? And I think you could tie it into somebody as a consumer there. I use the speaker for various things. It's not just something I listen on, right? So like, there's a lot of elements to me. I listen to podcasts. I listen to hip hop. I listen to country music. I listen to all these different things. So like, I would think of a theme somewhere around like, there's a lot of different versions of you. So we've created the speaker with these different options, versions, like tying it in that way, right? So you're taking a value proposition of the speaker. Part of the value proposition is the fact that no matter what you're listening to, you can find you can find a listening mode that essentially makes the experience better. So that would be something. As an example, I'm not saying that's exactly what you'd go for because these are high-end speakers. There's a luxury element to it. There's things that you could run off of as well. But that, to me, when we're telling you to come up with themes, ideas, storytelling, tell that story, but tell it in a creative way. Tie it back to your audience, tie it back to your customer. So I just kind of want to pull a real life element of something. And that was something that I found that I thought I kind of think through.
no, I like that. That's like on the fly too.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, no, I just thought about it because I was like, how do you do this? I think that's the tough
Yeah.
thing. I mean, people see all these really cool trade show booths and all these, $1 million budgets. I mean, these are huge companies that put out these massive exhibits and they have so much experiential thought and power behind it. But Your average exhibitor does not have those resources. They don't have that budget. They don't have that size exhibit space to put on. For example, I told you I just saw the SK booth, right? It's a Korean company at CES. And it's
Yeah.
unbelievable. I mean, they called it SK Wonderland. I mean, the exhibit space looked like a theme park. It was unbelievable. It's massive, right? Carnival-ish, right? Theme park-ish. At the end of the day, you can get lost in all that. But what they were doing was they were transforming you into a new world, because that's what theme parks do. When you go into a theme park, when you go into a carnival, they transform you into a different world than what you're used to. Well, the world that SK wanted to convey to their customer is a world that's more sustainable, a world that has less pollution, and a more green world. So what did they do? They built SK Wonderland. The whole place was built, all the engagements, the visuals, everything tied back into sustainable, less pollution, and green. So it's like, I can't emphasize enough to people, what is the message that you want your customer to hear? What do you want them to know? Again, value prop, problem solved, the solution, your messaging, and then come up with the ideas, then come up with concepts and themes. Don't just come up with a theme just for the fun of it. It's got to tie, it's got to make sense, it's got to be conversational.
And I think on that point too, one that we did this past year, same chemical company that we were just talking about, but a different avenue of them.
Yep.
And their tagline that they were going with was knock out common beauty threats. And that was
Yep.
like the tagline that they wanted to go. So we basically came up with this whole concept about superheroes, about the company being superheroes, and then the threats being like bacteria, pollution, right? That's going to
Mm-hmm.
mess up the chemicals to knock them out. So those are the threats and like the villains. So it was like superheroes versus villains theme. And honestly, the graphics that they did on the booth were just so impactful. There was
Yeah.
a selfie station that had like cutouts that you could take pictures with, but like other than that, the graphics that they did on the counters and on the back wall, it was a 20 by 40 booth, so it was a little bit larger. So they had some room to play with, but the graphics were so impactful and visually stimulating that they were able to really tell the story with this. It caught your eye when you walked by. It was superheroes versus villains. They didn't have to go all out. They didn't have didn't you say they had a carnival ride in that SK Wonderland?
They did. They had
Yeah,
an actual
right.
carnival ride. Yeah.
Which is great,
Crazy.
but everyone's not going to have the money to put that in there. So you can
Yeah.
also be visually impactful with just the graphics, and then when they come up,
Yeah.
tie it back.
Didn't they have actual characters? Like they actually created different characters for this?
They did for like their teams, like their chemists and account
Mm-hmm.
managers. They
Yeah.
made them into superheroes, and they had like cutouts of them on the wall where you could take a picture with them, and then they actually put them on the graphics, and then they
Yeah.
made like bacteria, the threats that they're saying that were the villains. They made little cartoon characters out of like bacteria, pollution, and those are also incorporated on the graphics everywhere.
So what I really like about that when I hear things like that is I think what it does in a case like that, it sparks conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're trying to do at a trade show. You're in person to spark conversation, to have conversation, to be face to face. So if you have a superhero theme, right? Probably to a person walking out, it wasn't like super obvious as to what the theme and
Right.
how it tied to them was, but you walk up and you're like, hey, why do you guys have superheroes on your wall? Or, hey, why are you doing this? Or why are you doing that? And what it does is it now makes it easier to have a discussion because you're talking about superheroes, but really what you're talking about with superheroes is the message that you're trying to deliver to potentially an ideal customer. And it ties back. So you're telling a story, right? And you're giving them an experience with superheroes. So, like I said, storytelling and experience, people remember it. So
Mm-hmm.
you're being stickier with your customer at the end of the day.
I agree.
The other thing that I was thinking about that I think really is like something that not enough people are talking about with this is like, this is all just marketing. That's it. So as event people, I think one of the biggest problems that they have is having to put a marketer hat on all the time. That's
Mm-hmm.
all the time. So one of the things that I want to make a point of is I know most event people, they're really not marketers at heart. Like all the stuff that we're talking about, value prop, problems you solve, your point of view, storytelling, narrative, messaging, like that's all marketing stuff. But trade shows and events are sales and marketing. It's what they are. So I think as an event person, you either have to brush up on it, you have to get your marketing department involved, you have to take what they give you and run with it, but also you have to start thinking this way when you go to an event, because I think this is what it really takes to be kind of like uberly successful at these shows. It's how you stand out, it's how you differentiate, it's how you engage in better conversation. Is thinking this way and kind of pushing the boundaries with your brand, your product, your service, and all that good stuff. I think one of the cooler jobs that we did last year, as an example, one of our clients was with Security Central. They are a security monitoring company. So they are like the people that are answering the phone when you have a fire alarm, a burglar alarm, right? They're kind of like that call center. They're like dispatching, doing all that. So through conversation with them, we kind of came up with this idea as we've rounded out, like, what are they about? What do they want the industry to know about them? What is the message that they want? And we ended up designing them a house, not anything earth shattering, but I mean, the trade show booth did not even look like a trade show booth. The trade show booth looked like a house. And then it had like windows looking in, and the windows had graphics. It looked like a family. What was it that with the protection thing? We were talking about it earlier, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
protect what you love or something like that. Like they had a certain
Or their
a
slogan is was
tagline.
the, yeah,
Yeah.
protect what you value. So then when you
Protect
said
what you
like,
value.
the graphics that were facing the aisle, and you looked at them, they looked like windows with like a family inside of it. And then
Yeah.
one area was like a retail store, right? For like businesses, how you said they do houses and businesses. So, what do
Yep.
you value? And then, we did this big custom roof structure on top. That was like the hanging sign that really, brought the whole booth together. And like you said,
Yeah.
nothing earth shattering, but, you take a roof when it had like little windows up at the top, and then you could be a house, it could be a business, protect what
Yep.
you value. And then they did the graphics on the outside that looked like you're looking in business or a
Yeah.
home. And then you kind of, we even did a walkway, like a door walkway that you walked through.
Yep.
Like you
Everything
were
was
coming
themed
in.
around it.
Yep.
And I think after talking to them, I mean, they were ecstatic. Like they drew more interest. They had better conversations. They drew more leads from the show. And it was so simple. And at the end of the day, like they could have just done a nice structure and put their branding on it and had it look good. And they could have put their messaging on there about security and, protect what they could have done that. But why not take the extra step? Like I've seen it time and time again. It works. It draws more interest. Um, you are there to stand out. You are there to differentiate. And it's like just going up with a standard looking exhibit, even if you think it's a nice design, you're a parody in a sea of exhibits. Like you just are. I don't care how good you think your structure is. You have to come up with a theme. You have to come up with concepts. You have to do something different that's going to spark conversation and something that you can really stand on. And that exhibit absolutely looking like a home and then everything tying into that entire theme. I think it helped them with their conversations. I think it helped them get noticed on the floor. I think it had people, they're a pretty household name, but they still had people coming up going, oh, I didn't know you guys did this. Or, hey, what are you know what I mean? It just sparked, um, just made everything go better, I think, at the end of the day.
I agree. And it looked awesome. Another one that we did was, or like, I think little touch points that people can do, right? If you can't go all out, right? A big part of like right now, we did this a couple times last year, was take the logo of the company and make it like a focal art piece in the booth, right?
Yeah,
And
that's a
you
good
can do
idea.
it, extreme, you can do it a little bit simpler, but, just really having like your branding. And it was just like in people's face, it was larger than life, right? And then they take them and they can put it in their office after if they want to, right?
Yeah.
So get dual use out of it, but making it like a focal piece, a statement piece to make you like double take and look at it is another way that you can stand out, right? Even just we did a medical device company and we had surgeons competing and assembling like an implant on a prosthetic foot, right? And then there was a leaderboard, right? And then that was like the engaging part of their
Yeah.
booth. But
Yep.
then they had, demo station. So they, were drizzling in a little bit of fun with their booth.
Yeah.
We also worked with Warner Brothers this past year, and they were going to like a recruiting show. And so basically they wanted to just really have like focal of Warner. And they had a ton of different ideas that they were trying to they had Barbie coming out, right? They have so many shows like HBO. They're just
Yep.
there's so much that they can do. And so we actually took it back to basics with them, and we're like, let's just make it look like the Warner Bros. Studio that resembles in California for you guys.
Yeah.
And so
Because
did
everyone
like
knows what that looks like. It's very,
exactly
yep.
right. And so the water tower, right? Their shield, those are just
Yeah.
statement pieces for them. And so we did a big water tower in their side of their booth. We did a shield that, stood off from the wall. So it could be a photo op. And then we did like palm trees, fake palm trees that stood out, right? So it was not over the top, but it was simple and it was made sense with the brand, but it was still cool because it was different.
Very Hollywood in that
Yeah.
sense. And that's what they are. Right. So, like, I
Yes.
think a few things that you touched on there that I think are important for people to grasp onto is one, this idea of taking your logo or something visual and making it kind of like art deco, visually stimulating is always a hit on the show floor. People want to know, what is it made from? What is it for? Oh, that's your logo. Oh, look at that. Like, you have to catch somebody's senses. One, smell, sight, right? Sound. I mean, you got to catch people out there. So if it's something visual like that, great. The other thing I think you hit on there, Mollie, with the Warner Brothers Discovery piece is like, be you, be your brand. Like, what is your brand? What does it stand for? I mean, that's a big name, right? So a lot of people know, but like, what are you? Right? What's your vibe? What's your aura? What's your pace? What are you? You have to be able to sit down and understand that, because I've often made the joke, and I think this is true, where people for years would come to us and we'd be talking to them through design about their booth, and like, oh, I want the Apple look. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that Apple, like, you're not Apple. Like, newsflash. I don't know if you know that or not, but you're not. But to their defense, they're just trying to give me an example of maybe what they want to look like. But that conversation had to shift and say, no, 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 no. Who are you as a brand? What do you stand for? What are you known for? What do you believe in? What's resembling for people for it? And then you can build and work kind of from there when you're designing something, especially if it's a big brand. I mean, it's always way easier than in kind of like a non-household name.
Right, I agree. Also, to a different project that we worked on, we talk about Publix, how we work with Publix often, and they were actually going to an event outside, and it was called Deck the Chairs. And so basically, this event is that they give different brands a lifeguard chair, and then they can pretty much do whatever they want with the lifeguard chair to
Yeah.
create it to make it represent to their brand, right? There was like a school that did it that was inside of the city that it was in, and they made like a little house and they put the lifeguard chair inside of it, right? So people do a lot of different things. So Publix came to us and they're like, okay, what can we do? We have this lifeguard chair. How can we come up with a couple different concepts? What do we do? We went kind of back and forth. We worked with their creative team. And then eventually we came to the conclusion to flip it on its back and then create a
Yeah.
shopping cart out of it, right? So you talk about like, go back to like who you guys are, right? Like you're not
Yeah.
Apple. So Publix is a grocery store. So how
Yeah.
can we represent it? And it was during Christmas time. And so we made a Christmas themed shopping cart for them. And it lived outside, had a bunch of lights, reefs, but it just generally looked like a shopping cart. And it was just so true to who they are and their brand.
Yeah, that's a good example. I want to go back to something that you were saying earlier, and we touched on it, and it's this idea of like engagement,
Mhm.
right? Everybody wants to know how to engage people on the show floor. And I think like there's just no, I mean, look, there's parlor tricks, there's ways of doing stuff just to garner kind of false attention. But I think at the end of the day, like you are utilizing technology, you are utilizing human interaction, being like podcasts, panels, discussions, you're utilizing your product, you're utilizing games. Like there's a lot of ways to get engagement. But I can't say it enough. At the end of the day, it has to go back to the story that you're telling the customer. You can't have a game just to have a game. You know what I mean? Like, what is the story you're telling the customer? How can you work that in? That's why I love podcasts and I love panels at shows. Can you do it inside your booth? Can you host a discussion? Can you host it around the industry, problems that your industry's having? Can you get people's viewpoints? Can you get people passionately talking? It's a way to engage your customer. It's a way to host discussion, because engagement is something everybody always wants, something everybody always craves at their shows. And then my last point on engagement is essentially connect it to your offsite. Your booth and your offsite have to have a connection. So if you're doing dinners, if you're doing activities and you have your booth, like your engagement should maybe link all of that up. You know, how do you do that? Is it with a ticket? Is it with a VIP pass? Is it something they got in the booth that they then bring to the dinner? Like, how do you link this all up? Which at the end of the day, to me, always comes back to the idea of like, it's a bit of a marketing game.
Yeah, no, I know. And I think it was great earlier how you were like, it is a marketing, right? Because sometimes events you can get lost in like the logistics and
Yep.
and that's important. You have to have that, right? But
Yeah.
you have to have put the marketing cap on as well to tie back to, like I said, value prop. What problem are you solving? To think about these different ideas because it's not just a one solution fits all. It takes work, right? To come up with
Yep.
these ideas that people are doing to just to time and energy.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we talk about this a lot, but basically, like, a lot of event people are stuck, between a rock and a hard place. They don't have the marketing background, right? They're kind of thrown into the fire at times. They're having to figure out trade shows. They're having to figure out events. They're having to understand the logistics. There's so many moving pieces and parts at trade shows and events that you have to understand, that you have to make sure going well, going smooth, just to deliver, let alone now have to talk about the stuff that we're sitting here talking about. But I think the reality is, in order to execute well and execute at a really high level, you have to be thinking this way. You just have to.
Mhm.
You have to have that marketing piece. The marketing piece sets up the sales piece. The sales piece of events is what makes events go. If you're not building pipeline, if you're not making sales, at the end of the day, you end up running out of room, essentially. People are going to start to question, why are we at this event? Why are we hosting this event? Why are we spending this money? So it should always come back to marketing and sales, because I think that events are a piece of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything maybe you saw last year that was interesting? Anything? I know CES just happened. I saw a bunch of really cool stuff that was there. I also saw some stuff that I think people talk about. It's really not that great. You know what I mean? It's just a big booth and it's a big name and people want to throw it out there. But I really like that SK booth, the SK Wonderland. I love how they themed it. It actually makes me think, oh, was it 2023 or 22? Canon did it was like a woods theme and it was like a movie theme. So it was like this whole movie theater, like drive up in the woods theme. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was so cool. It was so cool. I just love those themes.
Yeah, no, they are. It's no, honestly, I feel like we hit a lot. I feel like we gave, we talked through, hopefully try to explain some of the different engagements that we did and how we thought through it. And then storytelling, like through the booths, how it all connected back and came up with the
Nice.
themes and ideas.
So I'll kind of leave with some thoughts here for everybody is, I think the idea comes down to theme, being experiential, coming up with concepts, ideas, and utilizing storytelling, right? And I think you do those things by you come up with a theme, you come up with a story, you come up with a concept and idea from, as a company, your value prop, the problem you solve, your point of view, the solution you have, right? Simple, easy way to go is if you already have messaging, if you already have narratives of a narrative as a company, take that and run with it. Another note is like making your exhibit space as physically immersive as possible, I think is something like leave no stone unturned. The whole thing should be physically immersive and tell a story. I don't care if you're a 10 by 20 or if you're a 50 by 80. It doesn't matter, because it leads me to, again, saying people remember stories and experiences, right? So if you're physically immersing somebody in something, it's a part of a story and they're involved in an experience. We talked a little bit about engagement. There are so many ways to engage people. There's no one trick. It's not like, oh, get a video wall. It's like, okay, but what's going on that video wall? How does it tie back to your marketing, your messaging, your narrative, your theme? What's on there? What's happening? I think one of the most important things here is, what do you want to tell the customer? You're going to a trade show, you're going to an event. What are you there for? What do you want to tell your customer? If you're going to get face to face, if you're going to have your brand out there, your brand's going to be exposed, it's not enough just to be there. So you have to be asking yourself, what do we want to tell the customer? Right. And then when you know what you want to tell the customer, turn it into a story, turn it into an experience. Right. Mollie, this was fun. I'm glad we kind of walked through some of these examples. I hope for everybody listening that we kind of got our point across in terms of the methodology, the framework, the kind of way of going about this, a line of thinking. I hope this resonated.
Yeah, same. No, it was fun. I always love coming on.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing it. That's a wrap, everybody. It's another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. Thank you for hanging with us, and we will catch you next time.